excited to be here today. And if anyone ever needs another presentation like this, I do these for free at lots of different libraries, or if you have interns or high school students or anything like that, that you think maybe there's a population or group of folks that would be well served by this topic, by all means, please reach out to me. So today we're going to discuss LinkedIn 101. As she said, I'm Nikki Ryberg. I work at the Ryberg Group. It's my own small business that I offer career coaching and resume writing. And something else that I also offer is help with any branding materials. So I'll get into a little bit more about me and my business and kind of how all of this fits together with LinkedIn. So let's get started with just today's agenda. Today, we'll talk a little bit more about who I am, and I want to talk about my own LinkedIn journey and why I am so kind of passionate about this platform, even though I am very kind of reluctant on most social media. So for anyone who's been sort of dragging their feet or they're not sure how comfortable they are with it, I'm really happy to get into the weeds on that with you and discuss what makes sense for you and talk about my own journey and why it's probably different than other folks. And then also curating a homepage that really matters. It's not fun to check LinkedIn and you won't really want to go there unless you're seeing things that stand out to you, you're learning new content, you're being inspired with ideas. If you check it and you're just like, oh, this is a giant sales pitch or a bunch of hustlers that don't interest me, you probably won't go there as often. So for me, it's a tool that I truthfully use as an educational tool. I learned so much on LinkedIn. So we'll talk about a way to help do that for you and your goals. And a big piece of LinkedIn is engagement. And so we'll get into some tips on that and then how to use it for following up with folks in person or virtual as well for networking. We'll also dig into specific profile tips. I'll give you some examples. We'll take a peek at mine, and then I'll give you some resources of some ways to kind of refer back to things and do that on your own time. And then if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out afterwards. And at the end, we'll have ample time for any questions. So feel free, as I'm going throughout this presentation, to just type them into the chat. I will go ahead and do the entire presentation and I'll save all questions for the end. Typically, the presentation might take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, and then questions, it just depends on how many folks have. So for the sake of anyone who's on here live today, that hopefully helps kind of give you an idea of how much time to expect. And the library is recording this, so for anyone who can't finish or is logging on later, they can always go back and see the link on the library's page. So before we dig in, I know one thing that whenever I listen to experts that I'm always really curious on is like, who are they? And like, why should I listen to them and their advice? If you've never met me before, which you likely haven't, it's like, who am I the expert to talk on LinkedIn, right? So as I mentioned, I had a background in HR and I left that about 5 years ago and started resume writing. It was something I did on the side, more of a side gig, side hustle thing to stay busy, kind of keep up with my background and a little bit of my professional goals, but I didn't really know where it would go. But one thing I learned is probably about 2 months into doing it was that most folks were like myself in that they weren't happy in their position. They weren't sure where they wanted to go next. And so while they may need a resume, it ultimately came back to what do they really want? And so I discovered really quickly that there was definitely a market opportunity for more career coaching and utilizing my HR background to really help folks figure out what are their strengths, what are they looking to do, and what does a dream job for that season of life look like? And once we know that, that's where we can really work the magic to have a super strong resume, a strong LinkedIn profile, a strong cover letter, great interview answers, all the things that go into the job search process, whether it's a new job or even just moving up within an existing organization or finding another role there. So I really got my start building my business on LinkedIn. Other than a handful of friends that needed some help on their resumes, was like, how do I even find clients? And at that time, they had something called LinkedIn Pro Finder, which they do still have. To my knowledge, it's capped at taking new folks, but I was able to go through a questionnaire and upload like my credentials, my background, and things like that. And LinkedIn approved me as an expert, which allowed me to reach out to folks to pitch my services. So pretty convenient for the type of work I do, because most job seekers, at least the ones that typically I specialize in, are on LinkedIn. When it's time to look for a new job, they hop on there, they start kind of looking around at job ads, looking at who else they know at different companies, and LinkedIn will actually market to them. Are you looking to have someone help you with your resume? Are you looking to have someone help you with career coaching? And so that particular marketing on their end allows me to submit proposals to folks that are already active job seekers. So it really did initially was just helpful from a business development standpoint, because I was targeting my ideal client. And that was great. Like I landed a few that way, and then I would connect with them on LinkedIn and different things like that. But where I really started growing my business and having a lot more success was following, we'll call them like LinkedIn influencers on there. And a big thing that they pushed was have lots of content, give lots of good information, things like that. So because I'm a business and I'm also selling what I offer, I started really getting active on LinkedIn. So currently today I have over 74,000 followers, and that actually really drives my business and gives me a lot of referrals. I'll have folks reach out that are like, I've been kind of passively following you for a few years. I really like the job search and career advice you put out there. Would you be able to help me like with my resume, or, help me figure out what to do next? And so I'm a big believer in LinkedIn because it's worked for me both professionally from a business standpoint, but also when I was in HR, I used LinkedIn a lot to recruit passive talent, to network with potential talent, and I really used it as a recruiting tool, as well as like a research tool to kind of check out who the players were in different industries, what kinds of things were going on from like a thought leadership perspective. So I just think it's a really good place to be professionally, to be spending some time on. So I've had some client successes and acknowledgements with this. I've written profiles for folks anywhere from like in college through the C-suite. And so I've had folks hire me to actually write their profiles and utilize it as a marketing tool for them to find a new job or to increase their business development. So I hope that helps speak to my background with LinkedIn. I also have a certification as a certified digital career strategist, which is just like a fancy acronym for saying like specialized in LinkedIn. So I have gone to additional training and have done continuing education credits within this field, because things are really changing all the time in LinkedIn. So I'm very up to date with things. So I hope that helps assure you that the advice you're getting today is very relevant, very modern, and very helpful. It would be helpful to know who any of you are. So if you want to share in the chat below what you're hoping to get out of this and why LinkedIn may be helpful for you. Maybe you're a job seeker, maybe you're using it for sales, marketing, business development, maybe just for networking. That's always helpful. I can help give some advice there. So the first thing is your homepage. I think this is really the most important aspect of LinkedIn, because if your homepage isn't curated to what you need to see, you probably won't go on that platform as often as you otherwise would have. And if you're not on there as often, it's like anything. The benefit you get from it is how much you put into it and how much you use it. So a couple different suggestions to make this better for you. I definitely think having connections is really important. I recommend connecting to anyone and everyone that you know. I think if you're at a networking meeting and you meet 5 new people, you should go back and add them on LinkedIn. Let them know, hey, I just met you. It was great to meet you. I'd love to connect on here. If there's folks that, let's say you want to work in medical device sales and you are in college, it would be great to reach out to some folks like that and try to connect, just saying, hey, I really like your career path. I'm really interested in your industry. Could we just connect on here and network further? You don't really need to ask for anything more than that. And most folks aren't really expecting more than that. It takes some time to use the platform to build up relationships and use that to a point of networking. And so we'll talk about that a little more later. A lot of folks are more cautious on this. From a business development standpoint, I have a lot of connections. I do not know all of my followers. I don't know all of my connections. Oftentimes they're folks I've met virtually, or sometimes we just have something in common and we connect. I think this really comes down to a personal choice. If you are looking to keep it more private and very, very careful to who you know, that's okay. Use it with who you know. And the key is, how do you take advantage of it? And how do you interact with them on LinkedIn or off of LinkedIn? It's basically today's Rolodex of your network. So the more you keep it up to date, when you do need to fall back on some network connections later, whether it's for work reasons or job search reasons, it's really nice to have it active. And if you're just starting out in your career, it's a great place to start. Or if you're someone who's maybe re-entering the workforce after a break, a good place to start is just thinking back to everyone you've known since high school and starting to add them and see where they work and who they know and some things like that. I'm a big fan of blocking the haters and unconnecting from sales pitches or creeps. I get hit up all the time with like, I can do a website for you. I can do an app. I can funnel you sales. And a lot of times I'll take some connection requests from folks like that if they seem nice, if they seem genuine. But if they start spamming me with 3-4 sales pitches within 2-3 days, I typically either unconnect or even block them because I don't have time for that. And I'm not really interested in that bot type of experience when I log on to LinkedIn. There's also a lot of us that maybe have worked with some folks in the past that we really don't care to come across their paths again. You can go ahead and block them so they're not even on your radar. Another example of that is sometimes folks that are very active on the job search will block their current supervisor or HR at their companies so that those folks don't see anything in terms of their activity on there. I really think what you choose to do with blocking or unconnecting is a personal choice, and that's something we could always talk about at the end of the presentation if you have more questions on that. But I'm a big fan of always adding after a new meeting. I just think it's a really good way to keep that Rolodex of your connections up to date. And so we want to back up and think about, what are your goals? Everyone's goals are different. I've talked a lot about my goals as a business owner, but what I'm more curious on for LinkedIn is, where do you want to be in terms of your job, your career, your professional life? Who's at the top of their game to admire? I follow so many folks in the resume writing and career services space that I learn from their content every time I log on. When I worked in HR, I followed a lot of HR folks. When I was in certain industries, I would follow those industries, the professional societies related to those industries. It really helped me see who was at the top of their game, some of the recent trends going on, just, staying relevant with information. But this will vary for everyone. So it's really important for you to take a step back and think, where are my goals and where am I hoping to go? And who's somebody that's already sitting there that I would look up to, and try to follow some companies or influencers or employees doing those very things. So it's time to find out and stay up to date. A lot of times just starting with a professional society is a great way to start. Follow them. Oftentimes, if you just type in, like in my case, I would type in resume writer. Well, I quickly found ones that had millions of followers and offer all kinds of really inspiring content. This will really vary by field, and you'll find some fields are a little less interactive on here than others. But typically anyone who's running any type of a coaching practice, consulting practice, or a business on here, as well as recruiters and folks like that, will have a lot of really good things to offer. So I recommend trying to find who they are. I think LinkedIn is amazing for learning. Sometimes influencers can be annoying. I get it. Like they're always pitching something or making their life seem so glamorous. I found that much more frustrating on other social media platforms. In full disclosure, LinkedIn is the only one I'm on. I've seen a lot of hype lately on TikTok being kind of the new LinkedIn, and a lot of folks are moving over to that platform to add content and to drive business development that way. And companies are using it to help kind of market their job opportunities to folks and different things like that. It's just not something I'm really looking to do at this time. And I find typically that the influencers on LinkedIn are less like that than ones on other platforms. But the key for you is to figure out who they are and to start following them and getting up to date with their content. You can find a lot of these folks by listening to podcasts and going back and following them on LinkedIn, or just looking around in your industry or area of choice. I think it's a great way to learn. LinkedIn will start to curate news stories that are going on that are relevant to your field. I get a lot on the labor market, a lot on job search, and just different things going on with companies because of the type of homepage that I have. So I think LinkedIn, it's just really important to keep in mind it's invaluable for a job search or networking efforts. And we definitely want to make sure that your individual profile is as strong as it can be, and utilize this site also for your homework. Like, let's say you are on the job search. Do you go out and research that company and their employees on here? Does things like turnover match what they're telling you? Sometimes you'll go into an interview and they'll say, oh, we have less than 10% turnover. People really only leave when they retire. Well, if you go back out to LinkedIn and research folks, do you see that they're leaving like crazy, like every year? Different things like that. It's really important for research and for just like knowledge. And then it's a great way to figure out who do you want to meet or talk to. So I think the more you start to do that, the better. A few things I want to point out. I'm going to bring up my own before we go on to the next slide. So just one second here. Must have disappeared. I had it up. So that all sounds great. A couple quick tips for curating. Let's say you keep seeing things you don't want to see. An easy place to start is clicking on these three icons, and you can put something like, I don't want to see this. Now, in my case, I love seeing new jobs. That's great. But let's say we go down below, and I mean, these are all great. But let's just say, like, I don't want to see this hotel one, right? I can just say, like, I don't want to see this ad, for instance, and I'll just be like, it's annoying, it's not interesting. That will keep it from appearing going forward. And you can do things like that with people on here. If there are ones that are constantly posting things that you're like, I'm so over it, I'm annoyed with them, just you don't necessarily have to unfollow them, but you can just say, like, I don't want to see this. That will keep it from going in your home feed. Another option is you can just unfollow them altogether. Unfollowing will allow you to stay connected with someone, but you just don't have to see their things. Or if you realize, hey, I'm connected with someone on here, I don't know them, they're annoying, I don't want to see it, you can always remove it as well. So if you start to do things like that, your feed will get much more curated to your interests. And another really helpful thing, let's see if on hers, if she's a good example or not. No, let me bring up a different one. There's also something called the bell feature on LinkedIn. So if there are influencers or thought leaders or folks that you just love their content, like there's several that I have that they just share such good things and I learned so much. If they have a bell on their profile, you can click this and it will actually notify you anytime they post. A little tip there is it's a great way if you want to have engagement on someone's post. Let's say there's a hiring manager for a role you just applied for and you noticed that they're actually on LinkedIn a fair amount. You could go on, click the bell on their page, and it would notify you anytime they posted something, so you could be one of the first ones to respond. It's a great tip to do from a sales perspective and just for anyone on the job search. So that's another really good way to curate your feed as well. Otherwise, in terms of the homepage, once you start to kind of unfollow and I don't want to see this and those sort of things, it will start to really give you the things you are interested in. I tend to do that, every few weeks. If I start to see things that I'm like, oh, why do I keep seeing this kind of stuff? I'll do that so that when I do log on here for like 5 minutes a day, it's bringing me to things right away that are helpful for me. So I think that's helpful. So I think you noticed, I've said this a few times, engagement is so important. LinkedIn is like a set of weights. The platform is only as good as the effort you put into it, and more so the effort you put off of it. So it's really important not just to like things. Let's say the hiring manager makes a lot of posts, example, for a job that you're interested in. Really putting thought-provoking responses to their posts, asking questions, and giving meaningful content is a really good way to stand out and to start to develop relationships with folks you may not know. And then from there is using it to reach out to them to say, hey, I've really enjoyed going back and forth on some of your recent LinkedIn posts. Would you have some time to do a quick 15-minute networking chat with me? I'm really interested in your career background and your company. I'd love to learn more. Don't use this to make the ask right away. I think where people go wrong with LinkedIn is they search someone out and they're like, hey, I applied to your job. Like, can you help me? It's like anything. People aren't going to help someone until they know them, until they trust them. You can't expect someone to vouch for you until they really have gotten to know you and know what you bring to the table. And that takes time and effort, but it also takes that first step. It takes that first initial, like getting a little out of your comfort zone and being willing to reach out to someone to say, hey, I'd just love to learn more about your field. Would you have some time for me? And then continually engaging with their posts, maybe following up later to meet again, that kind of thing. It's all goes back to building relationships and things like that. But LinkedIn is an amazing place to start. It's also a really good place to start with re-engaging with past connections you haven't talked with in a while. And it's just really helpful for all of those things. So hopefully, if nothing else, it inspires some of you to get a little out of your comfort zone. After this presentation, I will send a networking guide that I created to Amy at the library. And if anyone would like to get access to it, you can reach out to her and she can share that with you. It really breaks down how to blindly reach out to folks on LinkedIn that you don't know, you don't have anyone like in common with to make the introduction, and how to go about starting to build some of those relationships offline to use it for fact finding on what to put on a resume, or do you get an MBA or go back for a certification if you're looking to pivot into a new field. Things like that are really the best thing you can do is talk to folks already doing it. And LinkedIn is an enormous database to find out who's doing the types of roles that you would like to be doing or that are advantageous to you from a knowledge standpoint. So I just really strongly recommend, even if you just go on a couple times a week and start to give comments and follow up with folks afterwards to see if they're interested to talk a little more, I think you'd be surprised by how far you get. It's also really helpful to remind you of who you already know. So I had a client working with me over the last few months that I kept saying, you need to network, you need to network. You have a lot of connections, more than you realize you do. And they were like, well, I just keep applying online. I'm not getting anywhere. And I know you say I need to network, but it's just it's so time consuming and I hate it. And I'm like, I'm telling you, like, you need to do it. Well, after applying to a couple hundred jobs, not getting any traction, they finally buckled down and started networking with just who they already knew by getting back on LinkedIn and reminding themselves of like, oh yeah, 5 years ago, I worked on this project with this bigwig. I should talk to them because they know someone at the job I just applied to. So they had 2 examples of things like that. A job they applied to, they had someone put in a good word. They got an interview right away with the hiring manager and the recruiter. And then in another case, they knew someone at a job they applied to, and that person got them in touch right away, and it went right to the hiring manager after hundreds of job applications going nowhere. So just even using LinkedIn to really stay up to speed on who your connections are and being willing to reach out to them to say, hey, could you make an introduction, or could you put in a good word for me? That too goes a really long ways, not just on the job search, but from an overall like sales marketing perspective as well. So your profile is important. I've been talking a lot about your homepage, a lot about how to use this to engage with folks. But ultimately, one of the first things people will do if you do reach out, whether you're reconnecting after several years or you're looking to kind of form like a new networking relationship, is they are going to look at your profile. So I don't want to gloss over the importance of having an up-to-date profile. So what I'd like to do is just pull my own profile up to give some quick tips. And then from there, we'll kind of get into it a little more, and we'll go back and re-summarize what we go over. But if any of you are looking to do your LinkedIn profile, I would recommend, feel free to take a look at mine. I keep this pretty up to date. I probably change it once a month or so just to make sure it's always relevant and fresh. So the first thing is you really do need a good background image. Canva is a great place to start. They allow you to design your own. It's oftentimes free, or if you do want to premiere one, it's like a couple bucks. It's worthwhile to do. This particular one I picked up on a free Google Images search 5 years ago, and I probably should update it, but because it matches my shirt, I keep it because I just think it looks nice with my headshot. So, you want this to match the type of jobs you're going towards, not what you're doing now. Now, if you're in sales now and you really want to sell the heck out of your, company or whatever you're representing, then it would make sense to have this match, what you're selling. But if you're using it more from a networking or where you're going perspective, you want it more generic and more in line with where you're going. So there's all sorts of articles out there. You can Google them in terms of like tips for a background image, but just know that searching Google Images for free ones that allow you, like, don't have copyright restrictions or anything on them, or Canva is a great place. An updated headshot is really important. Anytime someone doesn't have a headshot, if they are using this for business development or a job search, I highly recommend they get an updated one and they throw it out there, and that they don't hide it. Some folks have that locked so that only their first degree connections can see it, or that no one can. I am really not a fan of that. I think one of the first things people do if they Google you or if they look at your profile is they want to make sure you're real. And so if you don't have anything there, it can look like you're a bot, or they kind of wonder what's going on. And so I definitely recommend it. There's a variety of photographers here in the Madison area that offer headshots. You can reach out to me offline if you'd like some suggestions on ones. Another option is something called, I think it's called the Headshot Wizard. You can try Googling it. It's a gal out of the Australia area who will take pictures that you take of yourself, like on your cell phone, and she will mock them up to look a little more jazzy for LinkedIn. She does a really good job. I've had a lot of clients use her, and she's very economical. So if budgets are tight, that's an option. And so is doing it yourself. I've had some clients do beautiful ones, just having someone take a picture of them on a cell phone and working with editing and, being patient in the process to kind of get the right look and feel. But I definitely recommend keeping that up to date every few years. If you have one that's 20 years old and you show up to the interview looking significantly older, it's going to raise some eyebrows. So I definitely like keeping it up to date every few years. I don't think it's something you need to spend money on each year, but definitely if it's been a while, I would recommend taking advantage of it. And then keep an eye on like job fairs and things like that. Oftentimes they will have them a handful of times throughout the year, and local photographers will donate their time to do updated headshots. Here in Madison, I know a lot of the co-working spaces often have like networking events or different things they offer, and they too will usually throw in some free headshots just because it's advantageous to folks like starting out with a business. So feel free to take advantage of those if you're looking for something else and budgets are tight. This is considered like I call it a tagline. It's oftentimes folks just have it default to their current job title. You want this to represent who you are and where you're going. I could talk for hours on how to come up with one. We're not going to spend the time on that today. My recommendation to you is look to others for inspiration. So, like, for instance, if you were in accounting, I would type into the search bar up here, accounting, and I would look for some folks that have taglines or titles that stand out and use those for ideas to do your own. I think that's one of the easiest places to start if you're like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm sure you can Google it, and there's probably lots of articles out there that suggest it as well. But if you learn nothing else today, just remember this really does need to represent kind of where you are, but more so where you're going or what you have to offer. I have hashtags here because I talk about a lot of different things. You can do something like that if you are trying to sell, or if you are trying to be on the job search and you want to have people more easily find you. Look into something like that. It's really easy to do. Then you just want to make sure you're consistent about including those when you do post. If you're open to work, I definitely suggest keeping the open to work information up to date. You don't need to make it public. You can keep it private, so it's just for recruiters. LinkedIn tries to do a really good job of hiding it from your current company, but I'll be honest, if your current company is using third-party recruiters or like outside recruiters to do things, it's going to be pretty easy for one of them to pick it up. But my advice would be always keep it up to date. Even if your current company questions it, like, we just don't know what the future will hold after living through a pandemic for 2 years and all of the uncertainty. I just think it's kind of naive to not keep options open, and any good boss that questions that, I'm probably going to question, like, how happy are you really working there? So that's a great way to just always be passively searching for a job without having to try to. It makes it a lot easier for hiring managers or recruiters to find you. So we'll go down to the about section. A couple key things here. Put it in first person I statements and make it real. I would recommend looking at people in your industry or in your profession for some ideas and examples, and feel free to start there. You can take a look at mine for some ideas and examples, but you want to tell a little bit about your story, what your strengths are, some top accomplishments, and the best way to get in touch with you, kind of ending with that call to action. Those are all really good things to do. In the actual experience section, I've got 2 listed on mine. My rule of thumb here is to usually go back about 10 or 15 years. It's the same on a resume. When you start getting older than that, you can run into some age bias, and then also just content like overload. Like, people are only going to go so far back, so why waste the time and bother? But I would definitely recommend like summarizing your position, giving information about your company, and then really making sure you mix in some results. If you had some good accomplishments, make sure to list those and to give some numerical proof to them or some type of context. That's a really good way to stand out on LinkedIn. And then if you have like certain targets you're going after, like let's say you're job searching in the legal profession, you'd really want to pay attention to what the job ads for legal postings are asking for, and make sure to work in the keywords that those jobs ask for. So let's say it's a lot of like, negotiating, client relations, trial work, things like that. You'd want to have those sort of things in your position so that when recruiters are searching for legal talent, you would pop up on their search. So that's another tip. And then, that's kind of also well served by things like this. Those are definitely keywords that folks looking for someone in HR would likely search for. So it's a good way to stand out in the search results. Unless you are within a year out of school and you're still unemployed, I would not put your graduation years on. If you have any type of internship, co-op, even any slight work experience in the field, you really want to be measured more on your accomplishments and your work experience than your degree and when you graduated. So I would recommend keeping those off. I think it's helpful to keep on if, let's say, you're a recent grad and it explains why you don't have a lot of work experience yet. Maybe you just had some volunteer work or some project experience in school. That would really make it clear to someone like, okay, like they just graduated in May, obviously, like they're looking for their first job. So that can be helpful, but otherwise I would take it off. Definitely keep any licenses or certifications you have on here, keep them up to date. Every time you go through a training or get something, keep it up to date, because otherwise, fast forward 3-4 years from now, you may forget about one and you're back on the job hunt, or, you know, looking for a gig role or something. And those sort of things are really helpful on here. I'm a huge fan of keeping the volunteering up to date as well as relevant. I've seen a lot of folks have volunteering listed that's from like 20 years ago. Unless it's really in the last even like 3 years, I probably wouldn't bother updating it or listing it. So try to keep it relevant to probably the last 3 years or so. And then anytime you do have new ones, add them. I'm a huge fan of recommendations. I think everyone should have a couple, from like a past supervisor, a coworker, a client, all of those types of situations. Outside validation of your strengths and what you offer are really helpful. So I definitely would love to see those on there as well. So that was a lot. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So just to recap, Canva can be a really good place to design a background banner. Also, if you noticed on mine that I had a lot of like, not a lot, but some emojis, bolding, formatting, different things like that. This particular website is one good one, and I'll make sure to share this actual presentation with Amy in addition to my LinkedIn guide and networking guide, so that you have access to these offline. But this one would allow you to do things like that pretty easily. If you Google it, there's a lot of other ones that have popped up on the scene in the last few years. This is just the one I was used to using. Just today, I was working on someone's profile though, and I noticed it didn't have as many of the emojis as I liked. So I just Googled it, and like a few other ones popped up so I could find things. So it's helpful to know that's how people get those looking kind of sharp. It's also really helpful to use that for your posts. Like if you're putting your own content out there, doing some fun formatting with it will get you a lot more traction. And the about section is first person and real. It's very opposite of a resume. I would never recommend anyone use first person in a resume unless it was kind of like a unique role or circumstance type of situation. But on LinkedIn, the more real you are and the more you talk like a normal person, the better. So keep that in mind. And you really do want to mix in results into your positions. Be careful with age bias, but you can also get creative to list key experiences. You know, and yes, to listing all the things, all the different volunteer work, the certifications, if you have a training, that kind of thing. I love to see those on there. So we're at the end of our time now for today. What I want to make sure I reiterate is I will have the library email you a copy of my LinkedIn and networking guide, as well as this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the questions in the chat, and we'll go through those and then we can wrap it up. So it looks like we got a question, learning how to better connect with businesses in my community. That's a really good one. And I love that particular question. I guess the first thing I would recommend is targeting the businesses in your community you're interested in, writing a list of them, then going on to LinkedIn, finding their company pages, and being sure if they have like that bell icon I showed earlier, click that so you're notified of any of their posts right away. In all honesty, most businesses don't do a ton of posts on LinkedIn. Oftentimes they will more so on other social media platforms. So what you really want to do is pay attention to the people that work at those businesses and start to look at what types of roles they're in. Are you already familiar with them? Are there ones you'd feel comfortable just reaching out to? Like for instance, if I was working in the healthcare space as a recruiter, I wouldn't be shy at all about reaching out to nurses, hiring managers, doctors that worked at UW Hospital, just being like, hey, we both work in the same industry. I really like your background. I'd love to connect on here and network further. End of story. That's kind of the first step to connect with them. And then if they ever put content or post something on there, like congrats on your promotion, or that was an awesome post you had, congrats on your, Q3 victory, things like that. That's a great way to go one step further with people at businesses you're interested in. Definitely leaders are helpful. A lot of times, like, you'll see that they're more involved on there, or they may be tagged in things. That's really helpful. I'm trying to think beyond that. That would probably be where I'd recommend starting, but more so if you really are looking to connect with businesses in your area, just figure out who's working at them, connect with them, and then just see if they're willing to chat with you for a little bit. But you need to give them a reason why. Like if they're thinking you are coming at them to sell them right away, like you're not going to get as many responses back. So you really want to personalize your request. Like, hey, I really love the work you're doing with your nonprofit. Like it's something I'm interested in getting involved with. Could we chat? Like, would you have time to just like talk for a 15-minute phone call? Could I email you some questions? Or would you be up for meeting for a coffee? I've gotten hit up for a fair amount of coffees from people either in my space or like maybe they're life coaches or therapists, and they may need to refer clients to someone like me because they don't do that particular part of the process. Or I've used it to reach out to folks that are even in my same industry, just looking to grow my network. I think where it really pays off is when you do that next step of like, hey, can we chat? But you really do want to make it personal, make it worth their while, and give them an out. Just like, hey, if you're too busy for this, or if you're not the right person, like, do you have anyone else you'd suggest talking to? I think that's where it can really pay off for businesses and folks in your area and even outside of your geographic area. I think that was the only question we got today. So I just want to thank everyone so much who did watch this presentation. If you have any additional questions, I think my guide, as well as being able to look back through this PowerPoint presentation, will be helpful. So thank you so much to the Waunakee Library for sponsoring this, for recording it, and for putting it on their website so that people can access later. It was an honor to be here. I hope I was able to cover everything. I'm just going to check. We might have had one more pop in. Thank you. I'm glad that this was helpful for folks. If you ever need anything else, I'll put my plug, follow me on LinkedIn. I put tons of LinkedIn stuff out there, so I definitely recommend checking there as well. So thank you so much for your time today.